Hello students, welcome to my first class on Object Oriented Analysis and Design through Unified Modeling Language. As we all know, C programming language is a functional programming language. Java is a object oriented programming language. Before writing a C program, we use it to write algorithms and flowcharts. The purpose of algorithms and flowcharts is the design to write the C programs. Here, UML is useful to design to write the programs in Java, and UML is also useful to analyze the given problem. So, algorithms and flowcharts are for procedural or functional programming languages. Here, the UML is for object-oriented programming languages. Not only for the languages, but also for object-oriented technologies like .NET. So, UML mainly focusing on analysis and design of object-oriented programming or developing any modules. In this class, first of all, we have to learn about what is a system. Here, the system means software system. A system or a software system is a group of interacting or interrelated entities that form a unified whole. Here you can see the word entities. In an electronic system, these entities can be called as components. In a mechanical system, these entities can be called as components or parts. So, electronic system, these entities are called as components. In a mechanical system, these entities are called as parts. In the software system, simply entities. Any system is useful for a purpose. As a whole, it is meant for the purpose. Here also, system is a group of interacting or interrelated entities that form a unified whole for a purpose. If the system satisfies the following 5 attributes, then the system is called as complex system. So let us study what are those 5 attributes. First attribute, frequently complexity takes the form of a hierarchy, whereby complex system is composed of interrelated subsystems that have in turn their own subsystems and so on, until some lowest level of elementary components is reached. The entire system is divided into subsystems, and subsystem is divided into sub-subsystems, and the sub-subsystem is again divided into elementary components. Here you can see the hierarchy. At top level system, and the next level subsystem, and below that sub-subsystem, and the root nodes or elementary nodes are the components. So in this way the system is divided. If this first attribute satisfied means, then the system is called as complex system. And the second attribute is the choice of what components in a system are primitive. Primitive means main components is relatively arbitrary. Those components are important. The total system is revolving around those components only. Yes, there may be 50 components or there may be 100 components. Among all those components, only 5 components are important to consider. So that we can say the choice of what components in a system are primitive is relatively arbitrary and is largely up to the direction of the observer of the system. This is the second attribute of any complex system. And this third attribute is intra-component linkages are generally stronger than inter-commoning linkages. Intra is different from inter. Inter means both are different. Intra means within the same. That means the linkages within the subsystems, the linkages within the subsystems, the linkages in between the elementary components must be stronger. Between subsystem to the subsystem, subsystem to the elementary system, and system to the subsystem. So intra component means within the same. Intercomponent means within different. Intercomponent example is system to subsystem. Intracomponent means in between the subsystems. Okay, this is the third point. Intracomponent linkages are generally stronger than intercomponent linkages. This fact has the effect of separating the high frequency dynamics of the components involving the internal structure of the components from the low frequency dynamics involving interaction among components. This is the third attribute of any complex system. And the fourth attribute is hierarchic systems are usually composed of only a different kinds of subsystems in various combinations and arrangements. This is the fourth attribute. And the fifth attribute is a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. Yes, any complex system is derived from the basic system only. That means a simple system only. From simple system to next level, and the next level finally it will reach the complex system. So these are all 5 attributes to say a single system is a complex system. System, complex system, first attribute, second attribute, third attribute, fourth attribute, and the fifth attributes. These 5 attributes can make system as complex system. And following are the examples of a complex system. First system, complex system, first example. The structure of a personal computer. A personal computer is a device of moderate complexity. Most of them are composed of the same major elements: a central processing unit, a monitor, a keyboard, and some sort of secondary storage device. Usually either a floppy disk or a hard disk drive. We may take any one of these parts and further decompose. This is about structure of personal computer. And the second example is the structure of plants and animals. This is purely related to the botany, but you please bear with me for some time to understand few new terms. In botany, scientists seek to understand the similarities and differences among plants through a study of their morphology, that is, their form and structure. Plants are complex multicellular organisms, and from the cooperative activity of various plant organ systems arise such complex behaviors as photosynthesis and transpirations. Plants consist of 3 major structures: roots, stems, and leaves, and each of these has its own structure. For example, roots encompass branch roots, root heads, the root and vascular tissue, root apex, and the root cap. Similarly, a cross section of a leaf reveals its epidermis, mesophyll, and vascular tissue. Each of these structures is further composed of a collection of cells, and inside each cell we find yet another level of complexity, encompassing such elements as chloroplasts, a nucleus, and so on. As with the structure of a computer, the parts of plant from a hierarchy, and each level of this hierarchy embodies its own complexity. And the third example is the structure of a matter. The study of fields as diverse as astronomy and nuclear physics provides us with many other examples of incredibly complex systems. Spanning these two disciplines, we find yet another structural hierarchy. Astronomers study galaxies that are arranged in a clusters, and stars, planets, and various debris are the constituents of galaxies. Likewise, nuclear physicists are concerned with structural hierarchy, but one on entirely different scales. Atoms are made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. Electrons appears to be elementary particles, but protons, neutrons, and other particles are formed from more basic components called quarks. Quarks are the least particles in the matter. And the fourth example is the structure of social institutions. As a final example of complex systems, we turn to the structure of social institutions. Groups of people join together to accomplish tasks that cannot be done by individuals. Some organizations are transitory and some endure beyond many lifetimes. As organizations grow larger, we see a distinct hierarchy emerge. Multinational corporation contains companies, which in turn are made up of divisions, which in turn contains branches, which in turn encompass local offices, and so on. If the organization endures, the boundaries among these parts may change, and over time, a new, more stable hierarchy may emerge. The relationships among the various parts of a large organization are just like those found among the components of a computer or a plant or even a galaxy. Specifically, the degree of interaction among employees within an individual office is greater than that between employees of different offices. A male clerk usually does not interact with the chief executive officer of the company, but does not interact frequently with the other people in the mail room. Here too, these different levels are unified by common mechanisms. The clerk and the executive are both paid by the same financial organization, and both share common facilities such as the common telephone systems to accomplish their tasks. So these four are the examples of complex systems: the structure of a personal computer, the structure of plants and animals, and the structure of a matter, and the structure of social institution. So generally, a software is also a complex system. Brooks suggests that the complexity of software is an essential property, not an accidental one. We observe that this inherent complexity derives from four elements: the complexity of the problem domain, the difficulty of managing the developmental process, the flexibility possible through software, and the problems of characterizing the behavior of discrete systems. These are the four elements in a software complexity. Again, I repeat, the complexity of the problem domain, the difficulty of managing the developmental process, the flexibility possible through software, and the problem of characterizing the behavior of discrete systems. And we have to study the properties of simple and complex software systems also to understand software is having inherent complexity. The properties of simple and complex software systems: a dying star on the verge of collapse, a child learning how to read, white blood cells rushing to attack a virus. These are but a few of the objects in a physical world that involve truly awesome complexity. Software may also involve elements of great complexity. However, the complexity we find here is of fundamentally different kind. As Brooks points out, Einstein argued that there must be simplified explanations of nature because God is not capricious or arbitrary. No such fate comforts the software engineer. Much of the complexity that he must master is arbitrary complexity. We do realize that some software systems are not complex. There are largely forgettable applications. Sorry, I am putting my phone in aeroplane mode. Largely forgettable applications that are specified, constructed, maintained, and working in isolation. This is not to say that all such systems are crude and inelegant, nor do we mean to belittle their creators. Such systems tend to have very limited purpose and a very short lifespan. We can afford to throw them away and replace them with entirely new software rather than attempt to refuse them, repair them, or extend their functionality. Such applications are generally more tedious than difficult to develop. Consequently, learning how to design them does not interest us. We have to understand what is the complexity of problem domain, the difficulty of managing the development process. The problems we try to solve in a software often involve elements of inescapable complexity, in which we find a myriad of competing, perhaps even contradictory requirements. Consider the requirements for the electronic system of a multi-engine aircraft, a cellular phone, switching system, or an autonomous robot. The raw functionality of such a system is difficult enough to comprehend. But now, add of all the often implicit non-functional requirements such as usability, performance, cost, survivability, and reliability. This unrestrained external complexity is what causes the arbitrary complexity about which Brooks writes. This external complexity usually springs from the impedance mismatch that exists between the users of a system and its developers. Users generally find it very hard to give precise expression to their needs in form that developers can understand. In extreme cases, users fault of either the users or the developers of the system. Rather, it occurs because each group generally lacks expertise in the domain of the other. Users and developers have different perspectives on the nature of problem and make different assumptions regarding the nature of solution. Actually, even if users had perfect knowledge of their needs, we currently have few instruments for precisely capturing these requirements. The common way of expressing requirements today is with large volumes of text, occasionally accompanied by a few drawings. Such documents are difficult to comprehend, are open to varying interpretations, and too often contains elements that are designs rather than essential requirements. This is about complexity of the problem domain and the difficulty of the managing the development process. The fundamental task of the software development team is low engineer the illusion of simplicity to shield users from this vast and often arbitrary external complexity. Certainly, the size is no great virtue in a software system. We strive to write less code by inventing clever and powerful mechanisms that give us this illusion of simplicity, as well as by refusing frameworks of existing designs and code. However, the sheer volume of a system's requirements is sometimes inescapable and forces us either to write a large amount of new software or to reuse existing software in a novel ways. Just 2 decades ago, assembly level language programs are often only a few thousands of code, stressed the limits of our software engineering abilities. Today, it is not unusual to find delivered systems whose size is measured in hundreds of thousands or even millions of lines of code, and all of that in a high order programming language as well. No one person can ever understand such a system completely. Even if we decompose our implementation in meaningful ways, we still end up with hundreds and sometimes thousands of separate modules. This amount of work demands that what we use team of developers, and ideally we use as small a team as possible. However, no matter what its size, there are always significant challenges associated with team development. More developers, more complex communications, and hence more difficult coordination, particularly if the team is geographically dispersed, as it's often the case in very large projects with a team of developers. And key management challenges is always to maintain a unity and integrity of design. The flexibility possible through software is a home building company generally does not operate its own tree farm from which to harvest trees for lumber. It is highly unusual for construction firm to build an on-site steel mill to forge custom girders for a new building. Yet in the software industry, such practice is common. Software offers the ultimate flexibility. So it is possible for developer to express almost any kind of abstraction. This flexibility turns out to be an incredibly seductive property. However, because it also forces the developer to craft virtually all the primitive building blocks upon which these higher level of abstractions stand. While the construction industry has uniform building codes and standards for the quality of raw materials, few such standards exist in the software industry. As a result, software development remains a labor-intensive business. And the next point is the problem of characterizing the behavior of discrete systems. if we toss a ball into the air, we can reliably predict its path because we know that under normal conditions certain laws of physics apply. We would be very surprised if just because we threw the ball a little harder halfway through its flight, it suddenly stopped and shot straight up into the air. In a not quite debugged software simulation of the ball motion, exactly that kind of behavior can easily occur. Organized and disorganized complexity. In organized and disorganized complexity, we have to study canonical form of a complex system. This is a very vast topic. Please bear with me to listen clearly. The discovery of common abstractions and mechanisms greatly facilitates our understanding of complex systems. For example, with just a few minutes of orientation, an experienced pilot can step into multi-engine jet aircraft he or she has never flown before and safely fly the vehicle, having the recognized properties common to all such aircraft, such as the functioning of the rudders, ailerons, and throttle. The pilot primitively needs to learn what properties are unique to that particular aircraft. If the pilot already knows how to fly a given aircraft, it is far easier to know how to fly similar one. This example suggests that we have been using the term hierarchy in rather loose fashion. Most interesting systems do not embody a single hierarchy. Instead, we find that many different hierarchies are usually present within the same complex system. For example, an aircraft may be studied by decomposing it into its propulsion systems, flight control systems, and so on. This decomposition represents structural or part of hierarchy. Alternatively, we can cut across the system in an entirely orthogonal way. For example, a turbofan engine is a specific kind of jet engine, and a Pratt & Whitney TF30 is a specific kind of turbofan engine. Stated another way, a jet engine represents a generalization of the properties common to every kind of jet engine. A turbofan engine is simply specified kind of jet engine with properties that distinguish it, for example, from ramjet engines. And the next point is the limitations of human capacity dealing with the complexity. Before that, a few points in canonical form of complex system that also we will discuss. Combining the concept of class and object structure together with the 5 attributes of complex system, we find what virtually all complex systems take and the same canonical form. Here we see the 2 orthogonal hierarchy systems, its class structure and its object structure. Each hierarchy is layered with the more abstract classes and objects built upon more primitive ones. What class or object is chosen as primitive is relative to the problem at hand, especially among the parts of the object structure. There are class collaborations among objects at the same level of abstraction. Looking inside any given levels reveals at another level of complexity. Notice also that the class structure and the object structure not completely independent. Rather, each object in the object structure represents specific instance of some class. As the figure suggests, there are usually many more objects than classes of objects within the complex system. Thus, by showing the part of as well as the is a hierarchy, we explicitly expose redundance of the system under consideration. If we did not reveal system's class structure, we would have to duplicate our knowledge about the properties of each individual part. With the inclusion of the class structure, we capture these common properties at one place. If we know what the design complex software system should be like, why do we still have serious problems in successfully developing them? As we discuss in the next chapter, this concept of organizing complexity of software is relatively new. However, there is yet another factor that dominates the fundamental limitations of the human capacity for dealing with complexity. As we first begin to analyze a complex software system, we find many parts that must interact in a multitude of intricate ways with little perceptible commonality and among either the parts or their interactions. This is an example of disorganized complexity. As we work to bring organization to this complexity through this process of design, we must think about many things at once. This is the limitations of human capacity for dealing with the complexity. In the next class, we will discuss about bringing order to chaos, but I have to discuss briefly about bringing order to chaos. The role of decomposition. As Dijkstra suggests, the technique of mastering complexity has been known since ancient times. Divide and rule. When designing a complex software system, it is essential to decompose it into smaller and smaller parts, each of which we may then refine independently. In this manner, we satisfy the very real constraint that exists upon the channel capacity of human organization. And cognition also. To understand any given level of system, we need only comprehend a few parts at once. Indeed, as Parnas observes, intelligent decomposition directly addresses the inherent complexity of software by forcing division of systems state space. Thank you.